Alright guys, we're going to be taking you through how to install the KiiL 6.5 kit.
Ensure to use the hardware provided. Please don't try reusing any axle or hub bolts.
Start by removing the fender or flight fin bolts and the top foot pad bolts. When setting bolts aside, please be sure to mark down each bolt, as this video will not be going over specific lengths. Flip the board over and start by removing the foot pad bolts, the foot pad, and then the top bumper bolts. Ensure you hold the foot pad when removing the last two bolts, as the foot pad will drop. Flip the one wheel over and unscrew the yellow connector going counterclockwise. Remove the remaining two bolts from both the front and back bumper, followed by removing the bumpers themselves. You can now flip over the board and remove the controller cover. Remove the two Phillips screws from the wire covers on both sides of the axle. If you have stock rails, ensure you remove the wire covers. There are 3 total. Remove the remaining 2 motor connectors. Be sure to pull back on the white tab, push down on the black part so you don't break anything. The other connector is a round style, just like the foot pad. Next, we need to get the axle bolts out. What I like to do is remove all the bolts on the board, get my hub out, and put it in my vise with a rag. This allows me to get the axle bolts loose without damaging anything, and I find it much easier. If you don't have a vise, you can use the board as leverage. Loosen off 2 bolts, flip the board over, and you'll have access to the other 2 inner bolts. Alright, it's time for that install. So, you'll notice we have 2 different sides here. One has a slot or groove for the wire harness, and the other one doesn't. The other one is for the motor wire side. We're going to be installing that first.
Don't reuse your old hardware. Use the new provided hardware or you could damage something.
Your Loctite and put the first side on. Note, if you have side kicks, you will have to remove them from the top and bottom due to clearance.
Flip the board over and start putting the hub in, wire side down.
Be mindful of your hub wire. You'll see here on the bottom it has a groove and channel that it fits in. Alright, next step, to make your life a little bit easier, remove that valve stem cover. And then we're going to kind of shimmy the top plate in. So you're going to want to be mindful of your wire harness here and just kind of shimmy and move it in without bending your wire harness too much. And you'll notice it'll just kind of pop into place there. Alright, and we're going to grab our Loctite again.
Grab the 2 remaining hub bolts provided with the kit and screw them in. Reminder, don't reuse hardware.
Now that we're done those, we'll grab some more Loctite and grab our inner hub bolts and get those screwed in. Flip the board over carefully and install the remaining 2 inner hub bolts, ensuring that you also add Loctite. Ensure these bolts and all other axle and hub bolts are very tight. Next, we're going to install the zip tie on the wire harness. This ensures us that the wire harness is out of the way and protected. Now it's time to install the shocks. Rotate the collars counterclockwise all the way to allow clearance for the shocks to go in. Grab 1 shock bolt and 3 washers. This is to accommodate the larger valve stem. Once completed, grab the bar for the top, line it up, and then grab the other shock bolt. Put in the aluminum spacer, and then put in the shock bolt with 1 washer on the outside. Remember to ensure the collar is loose on the shock and compress it with your hands if need be. Flip over the board and rinse and repeat. The difference here being we only have 1 washer on the bottom shock bolt versus 3 like the other side. And on the top we're putting an aluminum spacer in, always adding Loctite, and then adding our remaining shock bolt. Alright, now it's time to tighten everything. Make sure you tighten all the shock bolts on both sides. Make sure they're good and snug. Alright, and now we need to install the motor wire cap. This part's actually pretty important you do properly. You don't want to pinch this wire, but you want to ensure that this is very snug. Don't mind my out of focus image here, but just trying to give you guys a better idea on how this looks when it's tight. Just a friendly reminder about Loctite. If you missed any of the screws we just put together, go back and make sure you add Loctite. Alright, so we're going to kind of just speed through this section, but we're going to just reassemble the board. This is just your normal reassembly, so add your controller cover, your bumper of choice, and your foot pads. If you plan on running flight fins or no fender, you can assemble as normal. If you plan on using a fender, use the fender risers and the longer bolts to attach it. Now we need to tighten both shock collars. What I like to do is get them hand tight, but try to make them even. Then you're going to want to use a measuring device to measure the distance between the shock collar and the rail. Ensure that both sides are the same before you move on to the next step. When standing still on the board, you want the lower center shock bolt to match up with the etched line on the side of the kit. Different riders may prefer different centers of gravity, and this can be adjusted using the collar. Just always ensure that both sides are even. At last, that time we've been waiting for. Time to shred it. If you're bored, here's a short video of me hitting the local trail. Thanks for sticking along for the install, guys. Have a good day.